Welcome to my Facebook Live event on Is There Something Positive to be Taken Out of the Australian Bushfire Season? My name is Amanda Hall, Psychic. I've been in the psychic industry here in Australia for well over 40 years. I've been working with psychic stuff and I've been working with astrology for that length of time, and it's been an interesting time this year as I've had many people from around the world messaging me, inboxing me, asking me why these things are happening. Amanda, I don't understand it. Is there some reason for this? How do we cope with such stresses in our lives? How do we cope with seeing these very graphic news stories on the television, and it's sort of like we look at it and we think it's some sort of horror movie that's unfolding in front of our very eyes. And it's been a very difficult time for people, I think, to try and sort of comprehend and understand these weather events. And it's not just bushfires here in Australia, it's flooding, it's typhoons, it's earthquakes, it's many things around the world. And people are sort of starting to ask why are these things happening? Is there something that I can do? Is there some way that we can contribute to sort of understanding this? Is there something we can do to collectively sort of change what's happening? I want to be very clear before I get into this on a more of an astrological level. I am not here trying to fundraise money for the bushfire event. That is not my objective. I mean, you know, people will donate to organisations like the Red Cross Bushfire Appeal if that's what they choose to do. That's not my role. My role is answering or replying to requests from people around the world that have been inboxing me since, you know, late last year, asking me, Amanda, what is going on? I'm frightened. I don't understand it. Why is it that I feel very uncertain? Even though the fires aren't near me, I can't stop crying. And it's those sort of things that I'd like to address in this live presentation. Look, I don't think there's any way that we can collectively sort of turn around and flick a switch and make everything all right overnight. That would be very unrealistic. And I'm not here to lay blame at anybody's feet. What I'm here to try and do is show you from an astrological perspective the potential why maybe this is happening and why these things are happening around the world and not just here in Australia. I'm focusing on the bushfires here in Australia, but please be aware that the information that I'm about to share with you could apply to any location in the world with any local weather event that's happening. It's just that for the process of this presentation, I am focusing on the Australian bushfires. And let's be very clear on this. I'm not here to say that I'm any sort of expert or that I'm laying blame at anybody's feet. This is my personal opinion on what I see from an astrological point of view, and other professional people, other professional astrologers may not agree with what I'm about to say, but this is my response to so many people reaching out to me that hopefully I can give you a little bit of peace of mind or a little bit more clarity or a little bit more understanding, or be able to give you something to be able to cope with during this terrible time that you can then sort of get on and move on with your life. So let's be very clear on that. Now, when we sort of look at an astrological chart, we always tend to look at things that, you know, where the person was at the time that they were born. And when we say when the person takes their first breath, we look at that or relate that to being sort of like what we used to term as a Polaroid snapshot of where the planets were at your birth. Today it would be like taking a selfie at the time of when you were born, of where the planets are sitting in the universe. And this sort of helps us understand a little bit more about how the planets, as they move around the zodiac or the solar system, and they do constantly, how they start to form aspects or influence us here on Earth. And for many people, they find the concept of that a little bit difficult. So just to give you a little bit of a brief rundown of what an astrological chart really composes of, there's 8 planets that move around the solar system at varying degrees, from them being fast to very slow moving, very slow moving planets that can take up to 244 years to do one trip around the universe. So, and you know, we've got luminaries that can move as quickly as 28 days around the universe, so around the globe. So you can see that there's varying speeds of things and varying influences that these 8 planets or 2 luminaries have on us as individuals. Now, where we get our sun sign from is the day of our birth. It's where the sun was astrologically in the sun signs as it follows its way around the zodiac at our time of birth. So that's something that we all have. Then we can go into more complicated things, looking at where all the planet placements are and where the luminaries are, where the moon was, what time, what place, what location that you were born, and all these things start to put together the ingredients of an astrology chart. But for today, we're not going to be looking at that, other than I'm going to quickly say to you, my research has led me to believe that 1901 is the general rule of thumb as far as the astrology chart for Australia has been taken, of when Captain Cook first started sort of looking around and whatever, and that's when the general consensus is of when Australia's astrology chart was designed, or when people seem to take their readings from that as Australia as a nation. So we're looking at Australia as a nation like you would look at you as a person. So it's interesting that Australia as a nation comes under the sign of Capricorn. So the sun was in Capricorn, and the other major configuration at that time was a planet called Saturn. Now, Saturn's the planet of discipline. It's the father figure. It's the one that hands out the lessons. So Saturn was holding hands with the sun in Capricorn at the time that they consider Australia started to be a nation in 1901. So it's very, very interesting, because now it leads us into what was actually happening at the time of the heightened part of the bushfires. Now, I want to be very clear. The bushfires, serious bushfires, started here in September in last year, in 2019. It really didn't hit the media in a huge way, and certainly internationally, until around the Christmas New Year period. And that was when the whole world started to sit up and take notice and start to understand that many, many parts of Australia were on fire and it was out of control. There is still many fires burning today, even as we speak. None of them are completely put out, as far as there is still many fires that are raging that are considered out of control. No, they're not maybe at emergency levels as they were, but they are still not contained. They still have the threat of becoming serious to catastrophic again. So let's be very clear on that. We are not out of the woods yet. We are not out of the crisis yet here in Australia. This week we are heading towards record heat wave temperatures again, which we know that sort of really does aggravate or encourage the fire to go out of control again, or fires with an S to go out of control again. When you get such dry conditions, and let's be very clear, Australia is a very dry continent. We don't get the huge rainfalls that maybe they get in other parts of the world. We are basically a dry nation. We are a nation that has many, many different weather events. You know, it's not uncommon for us here in Australia to have lengthy droughts. It's not uncommon for us to have floods. It's not uncommon for us to have weather events of lows and cyclones or tropical storms hitting the coast and going inland and, you know, flooding parts of Australia that mightn't have seen water for some time. These are all very natural, normal events. But what makes this fire season different is that these are catastrophic. It's not just one or two. There was hundreds of them, hundreds of these fires burning in all different states and territories around Australia, and little islands off Australia with places that have never ever seen fire before. And some of Australia's most pristine rainforest, yes, rainforest, has been burnt for the very, very first time. Now, from all my research, what I've been able to ascertain is when these fires have gone through these pristine rainforests that have never seen fire before, and they're not meant to have fire. So this makes it a very different equation to just a normal everyday fire, which we have naturally in this country. When we go into areas like pristine rainforests that have never seen fire before, and the vegetation is not used to it, and nor does it need it, then we actually change the balance of what we know as nature. Now, it's very early days, but the early indications from the experts in these sort of areas are saying some of these areas will never ever recover. We will never ever get the plant life, the wildlife again back in these areas, because these areas were never meant to see to see fires like this, and fires to this extent that the earth was beyond hot. It was hotter than a volcano. So if you can start to put that into some sort of perspective, fire is fire. Fire is always hot, but there's different degrees of how hot the fire can be. And these fires that these bushfires we've been experiencing this summer in Australia have been extremely hot. They're not just burning the ground level, they're burning at the tops of the trees. And you've got to understand how the fires have been working. We might have a major fire here, but then we get a gust of wind and it's taking embers anything up to 50 kilometres further away from the fire, where there is no fire, and then creating another fire. So we've had what's been known as these spot fires coming from embers. So with these tremendous winds and creating their own weather events in these fires, this is why it's been called catastrophic. Yes, there's been a lot of loss of life, there's been a lot of loss of home, and a lot of loss of native animals and vegetation, and all of these in their own right are very catastrophic. All of these things affect each and every one of us in a very, very different way. And for many people, they don't understand why they're so overwhelmed with these feelings of helplessness, of I can't stop crying, I'm glued to the television, I know I should be up doing something, but I can't stop watching it. But at the same time, it feels surreal. At the same time, I don't know what to do about it. How can I, as one person, do anything about it? What's caused this? Who are we going to blame? There must be somebody to blame for this. Yes, I suppose there's probably lots of people that we could point the finger at and blame, but let's not play the blame game here today. Let's just look at why this could have happened on an astrological level. And as I said, I've been working with astrology for over 40 years. I must admit, I've never really been a big fan of studying astrology of a nation and what's happening to a country or a nation from an astrological point of view. I believe that, you know, I prefer to work with people and things that are going on in their personal lives to help them sort of live the best life that they can to the fullest, not necessarily as a nation, because I believe that there's so many other factors that come into that, not just from an astrological standpoint. But what I have learned in my many years of astrology is we can look at things and we can possibly predict how we think something's going to unfold by the movement or the transit of the planets and the houses that are involved and the things that we sort of pick up, and the energy and how we know that these things work out and how they normally play out. But what can I say that, but we also always have an unknown element, and that's called human intervention. That we as human beings, we get to a situation where we have a choice. So if we come to a T intersection, we can either turn right or we can turn left. Now, you might be a person that always turns right when you don't know where you're going, but for this one time, you get to the T intersection, you don't know where you're going, and for some reason or another, instead of turning right as you always do, you get this overwhelming feeling to turn left. So what does that do? That creates a serendipity moment where we change the projected outcome of what the situation would have been. So this is why I say astrology is not something that's set in stone. It's always much easier to look back in hindsight and put the pieces to the puzzle together and say, yes, well, from an astrological point of view, this planet was here and that luminary was there and it was in this energy and making this aspect, and this is why this happened. So from that standpoint, I'd like to take you through where the planets were sitting on New Year's Day, the first day of this year. Now, we had these planets, I might add, were all sitting in Capricorn. Now, Capricorn is an earth sign. It is also the sign that is considered to govern big business, government, everything official in our lives. Now, official brings in everything, whether it's hospitals, doctors, dentists, lawyers, anything that you can consider on an official or a big scale. It's not necessarily on a personal level. It's usually on a collective of a big area or a big situation. So we had the following planets and luminaries sitting in Capricorn on this day. We start with the moon. The moon is the emotions. This is where we're governed by our emotions. This is what drives us. This is where we get our feelings, our intuition, our ability to be able to sense and understand things. Now, this was conjunct Mars. Oh, beg your pardon, the moon wasn't in Capricorn on that day. I'm looking at the wrong thing. We start off with, we had all these planets sitting in Capricorn. We had Mercury, Jupiter, the Sun, Saturn, and Pluto, all in Capricorn. We had the moon, I'm not sure where it was on that day, I didn't write that down, but we're looking at these major planets. So we had Mercury, the planet of communication. Mercury can be the planet that gives us our intellect, our intuition, not so much our intuition, but sometimes it triggers our intuition because it's thought patterns, it's ideas that start to sort of motivate us to look at things in a different way. Mercury can also be known as the planet of the trickster. He sometimes plays tricks on our mind because he puts silly ideas in our head and we act upon them. We also had Jupiter, the planet of opportunity, of luck, of expansion, of higher mind, of things being on a bigger scale, things that are being exaggerated, things that are, instead of it being very small, it went very large. So isn't that interesting? Because the fire went from very small to very large. Then we've got the Sun. The Sun was also sitting in Capricorn. Then we have Saturn again, the planet of the discipline and the taskmaster. And the final planet sitting in Capricorn is Pluto, the planet of transformation, of making us look at things in a very, very different way. Now, with half of the 10 planets and luminaries sitting in that one energy, it's no wonder that we had such an event happening. It had to be something that we are being asked to think about. What is going on? What are we doing in our world? What can we do to change things? What are we responsible for? Why are we not taking notice of the things that are going on in our own environment? Now, it's interesting that we've got the Sun and Saturn again, which I spoke about, which is in the chart of Australia when the chart was devised in 1901. That configuration is there again with these fires. Now, when we look at something in Capricorn like this, it's an earth sign. It's something that, as I said, is a collective. It's the bigger situation. It's asking you to look at things in a much, much bigger scale. Now, if we look at global warming, haven't we all seen the signs? We've heard all the lingo for it. We've heard all the arguments for and against, and everybody keeps saying, no, well, it's, yes, I acknowledge there's global warming, but we'll deal with that next week or next year or next month, or that doesn't really affect me, or I can't do something about that because I'm only one person. Well, maybe, just maybe, on an astrological front, we were being asked, with the planet Mercury, asking us to think about this and look at this logically and practically and listen to the evidence of what is being shared with us and has been shared with us for a very, very long time. Open your mind up, be more broad-minded than what you were. The Sun is there, and we're being hit over the head with the planet Saturn saying to us, you need to start listening. You need to start looking at what is actually happening. Now, Pluto, the planet of transformation, has been in Capricorn now for a very long time and will be there till 2022. So what he's been asking us to do is to transform, is to look at things in a different set of eyes, that we can no longer continue to live in this world, on this earth, the way that we've done in the past. We have to make changes. Now, when you look at this, actually making what's known as a positive aspect or a trining aspect to Uranus, the planet of the unusual and unexpected, sitting in Taurus, which is also another earth sign. Now, because Uranus was going backwards or retrograde at the time of this, when a planet is said to be going backwards or retrograde, its energy changes. It doesn't necessarily all of a sudden become destructive, and it doesn't necessarily automatically become amazing. It just says that it doesn't behave in its normal pattern. Now, the normal pattern for the planet Uranus is to work like the bolt of lightning, to strike out of nowhere, to come out of nothing. It can be something that happens suddenly because we're not taking any notice of the triggers that we've been given or the information that we've been given before. So Uranus comes along and says, bang, I'm going to make you sit up and take notice of me. I'm going to create something out of nothing. I'm going to be like a bolt of lightning striking the ground. Now, if you look at that in it making so-called positive aspect back to everything that we were talking about in Capricorn, but being also aware of the energy of the planet Uranus being like the bolt of lightning, and with it going retrograde or backwards at that time, so it's going to be behaving in an unusual or a different manner. So hence the dry lightning strikes that we saw all around the country, which triggered a number of fires, but also it triggered people's behavior to do stupid things, where there was a number of fires that were deliberately lit. So you need to take all those things into consideration. There's a number of reasons of why these fires happened, and a lot of it I think has got to do with that we all became complacent, that we didn't listen to things of the past, or we didn't learn from past mistakes. We've tried to sort of cut corners, we've tried to save money, we've tried to be very modern and very progressive in our thinking in the ways that we manage our environment. But we're now starting to see the earth kick back and say, well, hang on a minute, this is not working. What else are you going to try? How else are you going to look at this? Now, on a slightly different track, we had planet Mars, which is the planet of action. It's also the planet of war. It's also the planet that motivates us to get out of bed and do something constructive in our lives, was sitting in Scorpio, or again making another positive or nice aspect back to Pluto in Capricorn. Now, this is where I think we saw the positivity and the groundswell of people coming from everywhere, whether it was people donating their time to go and fight the bushfires, the amazing job that the RFS have done over these months. And I'm sure a lot of them are very exhausted, and they have every reason to be exhausted. They've been out fighting fires day in, day out, but also the response from around the globe, where we started to see firefighters and other nations offering their services to send people here to help us combat this dreadful catastrophe. So this was Mars in Scorpio. It means that Mars, the planet of action, was touching a chord, was touching everybody's emotional well-being and saying, hey, what if this was us? What if we were in this fight of our lives, like we were at war with the environment, we were at war with a major catastrophe like this, a bushfire or a flood or whatever the case may be? Would we not want our brothers and sisters from around the world to come and give us a hand and say, can we help you? So this is why we had such an outpouring of people sort of sending troops, sending, you know, firefighters from other nations to come and help us to be able to put out these dreadful fires and to be able to sort of start gaining control over this and get people's lives back to normal. So that's seeing Mars working in Scorpio in a very positive, dynamic way, but also working with the power of transformation of Pluto in Capricorn, saying we collectively as a globe can stand shoulder to shoulder. We can work together, we can put down our differences, we can work together in a collective positive way to try and put these terrible fires out. So it's very, very interesting that whether it was going to be a bushfire or it was going to be something else, if we take out of just the fire situation, if we look at everything that's sitting in Capricorn as the planet Earth, saying, okay, the planet is now kicking back. The planet is kicking and screaming and saying to us, we collectively as a globe need to take more notice. We can't keep doing what we're doing to our planet. If we do, we are going to destroy it. We need to start taking responsibility. We have the wisdom, we have the knowledge, we have the research. We all have the right to have a different opinion of what we think is right and wrong, but collectively we have to find solutions. We have to find something positive to come out of this terrible catastrophe, that, you know, the positive things that we take out of a catastrophe like this, and I think it's proven time and time again, that the power of the people that normally don't have a voice or don't normally speak up or normally, you know, have an opinion but they're very quiet, all of a sudden grow a voice. All of a sudden stand up and say, hang on a minute, this is not good enough. We need to be heard. We need to know that you're listening to what our opinion is. Our opinion counts. We are the taxpayers. We are the people that, you know, live in this nation. We are the people that have a right to have our voices heard. And this is why we're going to see, I think, some amazing things come out of this terrible catastrophe. And some of the amazing things that we've seen so far has been the willingness of people all around the world to donate money, to donate food, to donate their time, to donate their resources, to sort of want to join together and hold Australia in their prayers and do whatever they can for us, because they know if they were in a similar situation, we would do that for them and we wouldn't bat an eyelid. We're going to see probably some very different regulations that will come out of this as all the investigations unfold. And hopefully we're going to see a much stronger pattern emerge out of this, that we go back and we start to listen to some of the wisdom that maybe that we shoved in the back corner or hid in the back of the filing cabinet and said, oh, that wasn't important, or that was only their interpretation of doing something. Maybe now we're going to see that everything's going to be on the table. Nothing's going to be excluded. Out of all the talks that are going to, and the postmortems that are going to come when we get these fires under control and we start to get people back living their lives, we are going to see some very, very strong changes, and not just in building regulations and where you can build in the bush or where you can't build in the bush. It's not about pointing the finger at people and saying, oh, well, you shouldn't have built in that area. You've got all these trees around you. What do you expect? That's a very selfish, very nasty comment to make. And I hope people don't use those comments, because we all as individuals have a right to live where we want to live and where we feel most comfortable. And for some people that is living in the bush, and you know, they feel at peace. They want to be there. They want to take care of the animals and the trees and their local eco environment. So, you know, we can't sit in judgment of those sort of things. For many people, this is going to be a life-changing event. That's something that they never thought of doing, that with their lives being tipped upside down like this, that out of this will come new directions, will come new dreams, will come new opportunities. For some people, they may not return back to where they are. They might embark on a completely new journey and move to a new location and take up a whole new life. That will be a very individual thing. Can I say to you that I personally know from personal experience, there is never a tragedy that we can't deal with. At times we will feel overwhelmed. We will feel that this is the end of the line, that we don't have any coping mechanisms and we can't see the wood for the trees. But there is always, and I repeat always, something positive that comes out of every catastrophe, every disaster, every life-changing event that we didn't choose to experience. It's been given to us. Whether you want to call that fate or karma or your destiny, or you just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, it doesn't really matter. What does matter is that we all have to band together as a nation and as a globe and start asking the difficult questions. What more can we do to look after our planet, to look after this very, very precious place that we call home? It's not just here in Australia, it's all around the world that we're having massive weather events, whether they're bushfires in California or in the Amazon, or whether they're floods, whether they're terrible snowstorms or typhoons. We're having them everywhere. So that's saying to us collectively as a globe, we are doing something wrong. We need to change the way that we're looking at things. I don't think there's one answer fits all. I think it's going to be a collective, and out of this terrible tragedy is going to come some brilliant ideas. Now, if I go back to the very beginning of the very first planet in Capricorn, and that was Mercury, and that's where the ideas are going to come from. Yes, there's a bit of a tricky situation there, and yes, there might be some that seem like tricks or somebody playing tricks on us, but out of these arguments, these disagreements, these talk fests, these ideas, bringing everything out into the open and people sort of having all different varied opinions is going to be sort of like the light bulb moments. We're going to get lots of new ways of looking at things. We're going to get new procedures. We're going to get some of the wisdom of our Indigenous people. We're going to get the wisdom of our white people. We're going to get wisdom from everywhere, where people are going to have a different way of looking at things. And some of the wisdom is going to come even from people that came here to visit and help us fight these fires in this country, they're going to bring a fresh set of eyes and sort of, have you thought about looking at it from this way? At home we do this because of this reason. So collectively, gathering all this information together, we're going to be able to then move on to Jupiter, where we're going to expand it right out. We're going to look at it from a higher mind perspective. We're going to not necessarily look at it from a religious perspective, but look at it from a spiritual perspective. What can we learn from this? How can we learn to relate to each other? How can we work together collectively as a team? Whether you're black, white, brindle, no matter what your religious beliefs are or your political beliefs are, we're all going to come together as a team, and we're all going to look for solutions and answers to the crises that are going on around the world. So this is then where the sun's going to kick in, and the sun in Capricorn is going to say, great, we now have a collective where people are standing side by side, all for the same reasons. We're all looking for positive solutions. We're all looking for answers. We're all looking for ways that we can improve our lives. We can improve the health of the planet. We can make this a better place to live for each and every one of us, and for our children and the future generations that are coming up behind us. That hopefully then it will go down in history. Yes, this was a terrible time for the planet, and particularly Australia with the bushfires. But out of this came these positive new ways of dealing with things, of managing our environment, of looking at our global warming. We learnt so much as a globe. We learnt so much as a nation, but we learnt so much as a globe. So that then Saturn, not only does he take a different role, instead of being the taskmaster and hitting us over the head and saying, sit up and take notice and listen to me, we can use the strength and the determination of Saturn to be able to move us forward with structure, with logic, with practicality, with some really solid movements forward, where people are going to band together and say, okay, I might not totally agree with you, but overall this is the best approach or the best perspective for the collective, and we'll all move forward. Then Pluto will be able to clap his hands and say, thank goodness I've done my job. I've been sitting here in Capricorn since 2008. Finally, the transformation is starting to take place. I'm looking forward to moving into Aquarius in 2 years' time and shaking things up there for many, many years to come. But finally, I've started to get everybody to wake up from this deep sleep that they've been in and start to take responsibility for what they need to do in their lives. So then I come back to the planet Uranus, which I said was acting differently, that was creating that bolt of lightning sort of situation that was shaking everything up. Well, Uranus is finally going to be doing the happy dance too, saying, great, I've shaken everybody up out of their complacency. Look at how well they're all working together. You know, they might not necessarily agree with each other on every angle, but everybody is in it for the right reasons. Everybody's looking at it to create improvement, to find solutions, that they're thinking outside the square. They're not just looking at the ways that they've always done things. They're starting to look for new solutions. So again, this is a positive thing. Then I come back to Mars in Scorpio and the beautiful aspect it was making to Pluto, where Mars is saying we can delve under the covers, we can look under the crevices, we can look in different areas to find solutions, and we can implement these very quickly, and we can do it with determination and pizzazz, and we can finally bring the transformation that this globe has needed. And it's not just Australia, I'm talking about a globe. We need global transformation in every sort of possible way. So I hope this has been a little bit helpful, and it's helped you sort of understand that we are all grieving in our own way, that each and every one of us needs to be able to just work through this at the pace that we can do. And understand, if you do burst into tears or you have a sad moment, that it's okay. Let's honour that. We don't just automatically overcome grief in 10 seconds because it's no longer in the news. Grief is a very personal process, and it's something that affects each and every one of us in a very, very, very different way. And for anybody that's been through a bushfire or been through a weather event, you know that that never, ever, ever leaves you. no matter how little you are or how old you are, it's something that does change you forever as a person. It makes you appreciate things in a very different way. It makes you appreciate the little things in life, the things that are so important to us. And I think it also helps you appreciate that I think as people have got into this consumerism sort of thing where we buy all these things that we think are going to make us happy. But when you have a tragedy like this, you start to realize the things that are so precious to you aren't necessarily the most expensive items. They're the things that were personal. They were the things that were passed down through the family that mightn't have had a big monetary value, but was your grandmother's favorite necklace. And all of a sudden it's gone. And with that creates a grief that you no longer have anything of your grandma, only your memories. And this sort of triggers off another layer of grief in a very, very different way. And I think for a lot of people, there's going to be a lot of trauma that's going to be associated with this. And it's not going to be something that when it's out of sight, out of mind, that the trauma suddenly goes away. This trauma is going to be with people for a very long time. And we need to be very understanding of that people are not necessarily going to get over this in a week or a month or even a year. Some people will never get over it. Some people will sort of soldier on and put on a brave face as if nothing's happened and they're getting on with their lives. But you've got to understand that's their way of grieving. Maybe it's their way of they can't show emotion publicly in a way that other people do, where they're just going to be very emotional and burst into tears and can't stop crying or can't stop talking. And you think, wow, you know, how do I help these people? The most important thing you can do for people is just be there. Listen to them, be there, be a support. If they want to talk about it, let them talk about it. If they want to cry about it, let them cry about it. If they don't want to talk about it, then do that also. But just be there. Being there for people that are going to need us in every possible way. And, you know, bushfire is very destructive, as is any weather event. And I personally grew up in a bushfire area when I was a child, and I can assure you, even many, 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 many years later, I still remember the terror, the frightening fear of, you know, hearing the fire crackling and it coming up the gully and not knowing whether your house was going to be standing or whether the school that you were attending was going to be standing. And I can assure you, even now, when I see those things on the television, it brings back those memories to me as a very small child of living through that. So I can appreciate how this is going to affect people for a very, very long time. And it's the loss of what I said, the personal things, the things that were important to you, children's first drawing that they did, grandma's, you know, cheap beads, or, you know, granddad's war medals, or whatever the case may be, family photographs, things that you can't replace again. You know, no insurance is going to replace those. No amount of money is going to replace that. And I think it does change you. It changes you forever, because all of a sudden you see things through a different perspective. You need to make new memories. You need to make new traditions in your family. And, you know, it's going to be a time where people don't understand in 3 months' time, well, why you're still upset about it? Why haven't you just got on with it? You know, because their world wasn't affected by it and yours is, that they don't understand that. So I'd like to end on that note to ask everybody to be very patient, very understanding, and try and consider that person that might just need a smile from you. You know, just for a little bit of time can be the greatest healing thing that we can give everybody. So I hope this has helped people understand a little bit more. It wasn't my intention to upset anybody. It was a direct response to so many people asking me, could I explain it? Why is it happening? I don't understand it. That's why I did this live event. So I look forward to joining you again on a happier event. Bye for now.